What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in, and today we're going to be talking about a story that came up a little over a week ago about San Francisco wanting to pay criminals not to shoot each other. Let's talk about it. So here on the website SFist, we can see San Francisco will begin paying people not to shoot other people. The program will be called the Dreamkeeper Fellowship, though likely to be dubbed Cash for Criminals in the media, and will pay select people $300 a month to avoid gun incidents. Now, immediately upon hearing this, it invokes a lot of emotion. You think, this isn't right. You're giving cash to people who are doing wrong. Are we incentivizing bad behavior by paying people and saying crime pays? I mean, the whole idea is crime doesn't pay, but in this case, it literally does. But what is this? Is this based on any data? Is there any science behind it? What's the rationale? Well, let's keep reading the article. So for San Francisco specifically, SFPD data shows that more than half of all San Francisco gun killings involve the same 12 criminal groups and gangs. And we can see that demonstrated in heat maps like this, where a lot of the crime is concentrated throughout the city. I mean, obviously not a lot happening out here, but if we scroll down, we can see diagrams like this showing conflicts and alliances between different groups and gangs in different parts of the city. So the idea is, if you take this very small group of people that's responsible for a very disproportionate amount of the gun crime and homicides, that you could actually reduce this significantly by focusing on those problem groups and incentivizing them with paying them money and drawing them in to do things to better their life and not go out to kill people. So once you remove a lot of the emotion out of it and this idea of it being unjust or whatever, it starts to somewhat make sense. But does it really? Because San Francisco is not the first city to propose something like this. In fact, other cities in the area have already been doing things like this for years. In fact, there was a Daily Show segment about this very topic.
They say crime doesn't pay, but could not crime do pay? I'm here in Stockton, California to find out. Meet Stockton's young gun mayor, Michael Tubbs.
When I first got elected, we had 71 homicides, which is more per capita than Chicago and Afghanistan at the time.
Wow, you made that seriously dark really quick.
It's the truth.
And one solution the mayor's considering is called Advance Peace, which tries to get ahead of gun crime by interceding directly with potential perps.
Advance Peace program works with people who are actually actively shooters.
Violent criminals.
Well, they're technically not criminals. To be a criminal, you have to be convicted.
So I'm not a cheater if I haven't been caught.
Technically.
The mayor was clearly a cool guy, but what about his big idea for solving Stockton's crime problem? Advance Peace takes violent alleged criminals, and offers them 365-day-a-year counseling, job training, mentoring, and one other thing.
Some fellas are eligible for cash incentives.
Cash. You're giving criminals cash money.
The program is intensive, relationship building, case management.
These are a lot of fancy politician words, but your plan for lowering crime is essentially bribery.
So there you can see the city of Stockton, California actually tried this idea out. Now we're going to get back to Stockton, California, and then we're going to talk about another city in just a moment, because again, Stockton, California was not the first one to do this either. In fact, that started in the city of Richmond, California, which they talk about here.
Where did Mayor Tubbs get this criminally stupid idea? I headed to nearby Richmond to meet Devone Bogan. He launched Advance Peace in 2009 in this small California city. Now he's expanding to Sacramento, and Stockton hopes to be next. Devone claims Advance Peace is about more than just cash for crooks.
This is a gun violence reduction strategy.
That's the most bull I've ever heard of, saying we give criminals money.
But try to imagine growing up in a neighborhood where gun violence happens. Try to imagine a young man who's rarely left, not Richmond, but central Richmond.
When you look at the data, the homicide rate in Richmond has overall decreased since Devone started this program in 2009.
So as you can see, they talked about the program starting in Richmond in the year 2009. Now, I'm not sure why they started the data from 2009 instead of comparing it, or at least saying, hey, here's the data from 2008, and let's see how the rate changed since they started it in 2009. You'd expect the results in the year 2009. But of course, the year they started the program, the homicide rate jumped almost double what it was the previous year. As you can see here, in the year 2008 in Richmond, California, the homicide rate was 26.55 per 100,000. And in the year they started the program, it jumped to 45.82 per 100,000. So if we compare the rates from 2008, the year right before the program, and then all the way to 2018, which is the year for which we have the most recent data here, we see the homicide rate goes down from 26.55 to 15.32. We can see that's a decrease of about 42%. But let's take another city that's fairly close by and similarly situated, Vallejo, California. We can see in the year 2008, their homicide rate was at 11.27. And in 2018, the year for which we have the most recent data, it was at 6.51, which is also a 42% decrease. But Vallejo, California did not have this program in place. So we're seeing this decrease in crime, yet one city had the program and one city did not. Also, keep in mind that in the United States in general, crime rates have been falling since the 90s. As you can see up here, 1991, 9.71 per 100,000, dropping down to 4.96 per 100,000 in 2018. And even from 2008 to 2018, you can see about an 8 to 9% decrease. Now, of course, these swings are a bit more drastic in the areas that are responsible for more of the crime typically, because again, homicides and violent crime tend to be concentrated in very particular areas of this country. The vast majority of the United States does not have a bunch of homicide and violent crime. And remember, we were talking about Stockton, California, where they interviewed this mayor, Michael Tubbs. This guy was elected in 2016 with the most overwhelming support you could imagine. Here you could see his Wikipedia page. He's actually a very young guy at 31 years of age, which means he was elected mayor at the age of 26 years old. And you can see in the 2016 runoff mayoral election in Stockton, he won with over 70% of the vote. For some reason here, it shows 79%, which if you add up 79 plus 29%, that's over 100%. So that's not correct. You can see the correct numbers here, 70.57% versus 29.43% for the incumbent. But this all changed in 2020 when he got beat by a Republican by 13 points. Keep in mind that Stockton, California is a heavily Democratic city. So this mayor and his programs didn't appear to be so popular with the public. And that's probably because people knew that it didn't really work. Now let's talk about the organization responsible for these programs. It's called Advance Peace. And they publish these reports each year or whatever, and they're kind of weird and not very uniform. Sometimes they include information that they exclude from other reports, but let's take a look at some of them. So Sacramento is one of the cities that recently joined this effort. They've started doing Advance Peace. Here you can see how they talk about 84 firearm incidents prevented, which the data for that is not very solid. They talk about the costs associated with a shooting injury or a gun homicide, in this case, $435,000 for a shooting with an injury and $1 million for a gun homicide. And they talk about where they get these cost estimates right down here, the Public Policy Institute of California. And they talk about how in the program in Sacramento, they have 47 fellows. So that's 47 people, which they, give money to or whatever this program requires. And they mention how one of the individuals was lost to gun violence, 98% have no new firearm injuries, and 91% are not a suspect in a new firearm-related crime. Now, they don't present a control number for this. They're not presenting, oh, well, we took another group of individuals that we did not include in this program, but that we decided to track and see how many of them, compared to the people in our program, were involved in a new firearm-related crime. And here they talk about some of the characteristics of their fellows. So you have 47 of them. 80% are black. 45% witnessed a homicide. 38% experienced a gun homicide in their family. 19% received prior social services. Now let's take a look at the numbers for Stockton. So in Stockton, we can see They have some of these same metrics that they're talking about. Firearm incidents prevented. They source where they're getting the costs associated with these things down here. They have the number of fellows, 34. The numbers are a bit different here. So we can see 1 loss to gun violence, 88%, no new firearm injuries. So they're already doing worse than Sacramento. And 71% are not a suspect in a new firearm-related crime. That's a lot worse than the 91% we saw in Sacramento. And we go down here again to fellow characteristics. Now they're not listing the race of the fellows, but they did for some reason in the Sacramento one. So now they're saying 0% received prior social services, whereas before this was 80% black. But they're not listing the racial characteristics in Stockton for some reason. 30% are parents, 12% are on parole. So just interesting to note that they don't keep the standards consistent as to what they talk about in each of these reports. And they're very short reports. I mean, it's 2 pages, that's it. Now let's take a look at Richmond real quick. And what I want to focus on is this. So you see 27 fellows, 0 loss to gun violence. That sounds good. That sounds great. 96% have no new firearm injuries, and 89% are not a suspect in a new firearm-related crime. Wow. Maybe this program is working. Well, again, this is the year 2020. Let's take a look at what 2019 looked like. So if we hop over to 2019, we can see this is Richmond for the year 2019. Now, for some reason, they're showing stats here where before they were not showing stats here or here or here. But this one shows stats for shootings with an injury 2019, victim, race/ethnicity. So again, with the inconsistency. But check this out. And this report's only 1 page as opposed to the 2 pages for the other reports. But we can see here 100% are alive. Wow, that's fantastic. Great. 95% have no new firearm injuries. But then look at this. 76% are not suspected in a new firearm-related crime. Interesting. 76% not suspected in a new firearm crime. 37 fellows. Wait a minute. There's 37 in the year 2019. But in year 2020, there's only 27 fellows. What's going on here? Well, think about it. If the idea is if you break the rules, you lose the money, you lose your ability to be in the program. 37 fellows, 76% not suspected in a new firearm-related crime, which means about 24% are suspected of being involved in a new firearm-related crime. So let's do some math here. We take 37 and we multiply it by 0.76, and we get about 28 or so. And then, of course, we see that the next year that there are 27 fellows. So I guess 1 additional person fell off for whatever reason. And there you go. So you had 10 people out of a group of 37 that in the span of 1 single year had to be dropped off because they were involved in firearm-related crime. In this case, 100% were alive, so you didn't even have one die and having to be removed as a result. These are people who were suspected in a new firearm-related crime in the span of 1 year. And it was even worse in Stockton. 71% are not suspected, which means 29% were suspected out of a group of 34 in the span of a year. So in this case, the incentives didn't work all that much. Now, I'm not opposed to people running experiments. I'm not even opposed to maybe San Francisco doing a trial run, because what they want to do is they want to start out with 10 people initially. And if people want to run these experiments initially, that's fine, you know, because these haven't been experimented with in large numbers across many cities for long enough periods of time to where we have reliable data for these things. Morally, I don't like the idea of paying criminals. Like, crime should not pay. We already know what does work is actually enforcing the law, prosecutors going after criminals, not letting them go with plea bargains, early release, on multiple felony bonds like they do in cities like Houston, for example. And these people very, very disproportionately go off to reoffend, kill people. The recidivism rate is extremely high. But again, experiments are fine. Let's see what works, what doesn't work. Okay, fine. I'm not a big fan of it. Probably not something I would run in my city. But okay, let's get data, I suppose. But my issue is, even when the data comes out, you still see people adhering to these programs that don't work. A perfect example of this is the idea of gun buybacks. And if you don't know what gun buybacks are, the idea is that the police will hold a day or two where they announce to the public that they'll be buying back people's guns. So if you have a gun at your house that you want to get rid of, or maybe you're a criminal and you want to get rid of your gun, no problem. Bring in your gun, whether it's legal, illegal, in working condition, maybe not perfectly working condition, doesn't matter. Bring it in. We'll pay you money. And it's no questions asked. We won't, run it and then arrest you later. It's not some sort of trick. We'll just take your gun and then we'll immediately dispose of it, whatever. And that's the idea. The idea is, well, the benefits would outweigh the costs, but this isn't really shown in the data. And it's kind of been shown over the years as they've held more of these gun buybacks that they don't really work. In fact, let's take a look at some news reports about this.
The I-Team obtained records on guns collected at every local buyback over the last 5 years. We looked at the types of guns brought in and the total number collected at more than a dozen buybacks held by 8 different law enforcement agencies. Our review of the record shows many of the guns turned in at local gun buybacks aren't the ones typically used to commit crimes. They're BB guns. At 2 Clearwater buybacks in 2011, 20% of the guns turned in were BB and pellet guns. 12% of the guns at the Largo buyback were also BB guns. At other buybacks, we discovered people turning in broken guns, even a flare gun.
We found that gun buyback programs have not been shown to be effective.
Assistant Professor Matthew Makarios of the University of Wisconsin-Parkside studied the effectiveness of gun buybacks. He says even the thousands of working firearms collected may not have much of an impact on reducing crime.
They're rifles, shotguns, things like that, and less likely to be small handguns, which are really the types of guns that are more likely to be used in gun crime.
And this is where you run into this idea of unintended consequences. Going back to the gun buyback example, not only were people turning in guns that were not the kinds being used in crime in general, so they're turning in long guns or shotguns or even BB guns, guns that are not real, flare guns, inert rocket launchers, right, that could never be used or whatever. But you actually had cases where people would build nonsensical guns for the purpose of getting money, but the cost of producing the gun that they made was way cheaper than the money they were getting in return. And in return, a lot of those people would use the money that they got to go buy a new working gun.
ABC 7 News was outside United Playas on Howard Street as people turned in all sorts of weapons, no questions asked. One person even brought in a homemade shotgun. Most of the weapons were handguns, but there were a few assault rifles turned in as well.
I mean, just look at that. The person that's selling them this, the one that's turning this in, is literally trolling them. He took a 2x4 and attached a steel pipe to it, locked down with zip ties, and called it a higher point. If you don't know the joke, high points are this very cheap gun that's a piece of crap, and he decided to call it a higher point. And this is notoriously done throughout the gun community. They troll the gun buybacks because they know how ineffective they are. But if they can make some money, making up guns to go turn in that they'll get paid for, and then in return, they can go buy their own guns, they say, why not? Take advantage of it. And this is where the unintended consequences could also apply to something like the Advanced Peace Program, Cash for Criminals, whatever you want to call it, where it might have the unintended consequence of incentivizing crime. Maybe people would start committing certain types of crimes if they thought it had a higher chance of resulting in them getting paid. How juicy are the incentives? Maybe after these people are on the program long enough, they have the ability to negotiate for higher pay. If they say, hey, $300 a month, that's not cutting it. We might need $1,000 a month. $2,000 a month if you want us to continue not committing crimes, or people move into a city because they've expanded the program so large that every criminal can qualify. I mean, where does it stop? And now you have other cities joining in too. New York is apparently going to roll out this type of program as well. And like I said, I'm not opposed to experiments being run. Go ahead and run your experiments. I prefer they not be run anywhere where I live. But even if the program works, are we willing to morally stand behind this idea of people who have killed individuals or are just violent criminals in the streets, giving them our taxpayer dollars, or even if it was publicly funded, fundraised dollars, are we comfortable giving that money to criminals who might use it to commit more crimes or commit crimes by proxy, or just even the idea that crime would pay at all? Personally, I'm a fan of the approach of actually prosecuting crimes, not having these progressive prosecutors who decide to plea bargain everything down or not charge crimes for whatever reason. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join, and I'll see you next time, bro.